Hi everyone, welcome back. And we are in my office with Zoe. Angel ran away. I was going to have her say hi too. But, someone asked if we were at my house. So, this is the view of the backyard from my office window. All right. Well, we are going to read Imaginary Friend Fred today. So, get ready. Headaches are a pain. A bee sting hurts even more. But there's one thing worse than getting stung on the head by a bee on a rainy day, and that is loneliness. Being alone is no fun. The first 5 minutes are okay, but it's downhill from there. And if you're alone, you're alone. It's not as if you can wish a friend to love. Usually this is true. You can wish and wish until your hair stands on end, but no imaginary friend will appear unless the conditions are just right. And if you add a little electricity or luck or even magic, then an imaginary friend might appear just when you need one. An imaginary friend like Fred. Fred floated like a feather in the wind until a lonely child wished for him. Fred was always happy to be summoned, and he tried really hard to be the best imaginary friend he could be. He dressed up, he dressed down, he played ball, he became a ball. And did whatever else his real friend wanted it to do with him without once complaining. But no matter how hard Fred tried, the same thing happened every time. One day, his friend would find a real friend in the real world, a friend who did not have to be ignored when grown-ups were around. When this day came, and it always did, Fred would feel himself fade. Usually by lunchtime on the second day, Fred would be mostly invisible, and by bedtime on the fourth day, there would barely be a scrap of Fred left, just enough for the wind to catch and to whisk away into the sky, where Fred would stay until someone new wished for him. Fred was glad that his friends found each other real friends to play with, but sometimes he wished he had a friend who would need him forever. He dreamed of a friend who liked reading music and drama like he did. He imagined them sitting together, reading adventure stories and looking for shapes in the clouds. This was Fred's dream. And then one day, a lonely boy called Sam wished for a friend when the conditions were perfect. Fred appeared and soon realized that Sam was the friend he had been dreaming of. Have you dreamed of an imaginary friend? Fred never had so much fun. Sam loved to read, just like Fred, and was most upset if he didn't get through at least one book per day. Have you been reading? When they weren't reading, Sam and Fred would try to understand how the toilet worked. Have you been experimenting at home? They'd listen to music on Sam's dad's sound system, which had 13 speakers. That would be pretty loud. Or they would write plays and act them out for Sam's parents. That's a really good idea. You guys could act out some things for your parents too, right? But even though every morning brought new delights, Fred couldn't help thinking that every evening brought them closer to the day when Sam wouldn't need him anymore, and that would be the saddest day of his imaginary life. So Fred decided he would enjoy every single moment with Sam until that time came. The two friends pretended to be French and studied mime. They made Japanese masks, practiced their classical instruments, and planned their own comic book. They called themselves the Dramatic Duo. But one day Sam came home late from a party and Fred felt a nervous flutter in his imaginary tummy. Was this the beginning of the end? Was he headed back into the sky? Fred checked his arm and thought that he maybe faded a little already. When Sam came home, he had an excited look in his eye. A look Fred had seen before. I made a new friend, Sam told him. She's a girl called Sammy, which is funny because I'm called Sam, and she loves to read and has written and illustrated her own comic book series. You're going to love her, Fred. Fred thought he probably would love Sammy if he were able to stay around long enough to meet her. But don't worry, Sam said. Just because I met Sammy doesn't mean I don't need you. You're still my mean man. In Fred's experience, there was only room in a heart for one best friend. I'll always be your best friend, Fred said. Just promise that you won't ever forget me. I promise, said Sam, and he meant it. Do you think Sam's going to keep Fred as his best friend? Let's see. The next morning, Sam was gone when Fred woke up, and there was a note on his pillow. I'm meeting Sammy to brainstorm our comic book. Back later, your pal, Sam. Comic book, thought Fred. That was our idea. Me and Sam. Fred checked his arm again. Definite fading this time. When Sam came home several hours later, Fred called an emergency meeting of the Dramatic Duo. Okay, Sam, he said, I want to prepare you for what's coming. In a day or two, I will disappear. It's not your fault. It's just that now you have a real friend and you don't need me anymore. The best thing you can do is let me go without making a scene. Do you think Fred is sad about it? I don't know. Sam did make a scene. He swore he would never let Fred go. But the next day, Sam left the house early again to meet with Sammy, and Fred was left behind. I can see through my hand now, thought Fred. When Sam returned home later that day, he brought Sammy with him. Sammy wore round glasses that made her eyes seem huge. She pulled a cello case behind her on a cart and carried an art bag so that she could work on her comic book whenever an idea struck her. Sam introduced them. Sammy, meet Fred. Fred, meet Sammy. How do you think this will go? This is a waste of time, thought Fred. Only people with an imaginary friend can see an imaginary friend. But Sammy stuck her hand out exactly the right direction and said, Pleased to meet you, Fred. What do you think that means? Fred was surprised. He'd never been visible to two people before. He shook Sammy's hand. I know you're worried I won't see you anymore, said Sam, but you're wrong. I need you more than ever. Why? Asked Fred. Why do you need me now? You have Sammy. 2 reasons, said Sam. First, I never want to let you go. Fred thought he would cry, and that was only reason number 1. And reason number 2, he said. Tell him, said Sammy, elbowing Sam, the way friends do. Okay, said Sam. Reason number 2 is that we need you to be in our quartet. What's a quartet? Fred was confused. Quartet means 4, he said. There are only 3 of us. Ah, said Sam, like a great detective. That's where you're wrong. Yes, said Sammy, clapping her hands. You're wrong because there are 4 of us. What could she possibly mean by that? Sammy stepped to one side, and Fred saw a small girl with a violin case and a smile that made him want to smile too. This is Frida, said Sammy. Hi, Fred, said Frida, waving her hand. Sam told us all about you. I hope we could be friends. Sammy had an imaginary friend, Fred realized, and he waved back and noticed that his hand seemed absolutely solid, not see-through at all. Frida sat her violin case on the floor and opened it. We need to practice, she said, or we'll never get to Carnegie Hall. Sammy rolled her eyes. Frida's so strict, she said to Fred, but you'll get used to her in a couple of years. Fred did get used to it. He quite enjoyed being told what to do by Frida and her dazzling smile. The 4 friends spent all their time together having violin battles, reading comic books, practicing plumbing, pretending to be French, and arguing over what they would call their quartet. Oh, thought I missed a page. They eventually settled on the Quarreling Quartet, which they all agreed was a perfect name. The quartet made their debut at school Christmas concert, much to the confusion of the audience. Oh, there they are. So why do you think that audience was confused? The Quarreling Quartet, but only could see how many people? But then something interesting happened. The older they grew, the less time the 4 spent together. Sam and Sammy, it seemed, preferred graphic novels to music, and they left the quartet to concentrate on their comic book series. Carnegie Hall was eventually played, not as a quartet, however, but as a duo. Again, much to the confusion of the audience. And this, dear friends, is the interesting thing that happened. Even though they didn't see their human friends much anymore, Fred and Frida did not begin to fade, nor get swept back up into the sky like they had so many times before. Instead, they stuck around, being imaginary friends to each other. They became quite famous in the imaginary community, and a statue was commissioned to be erected in the sky above their imaginary house. These pages are sticking together. As this was the first case of its kind, imaginary scientists spent years trying to figure out how it happened. Eventually, they concluded that friendship is friendship. Imaginary or not, the same laws apply. The statue should have disappeared every time a gust of wind came along, but it never did. The end. All right, I was asked to include an activity. So if you would like to, write about your imaginary friend if you have one, or if you'd like to have one. So draw a picture of an imaginary friend and write about what they would be like. Have fun. I'll see you soon.